If you're suffering from stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, inflammation, pain management, kind of like I am pretty much all the time, I highly encourage you to check out cocanacare.com. And that's CO for Colorado. It's a Colorado-based company. Canna, C-A-N-N-A, care.com. They make incredible CBD oil that's derived from all natural, high-quality industrial hemp. It's legal in all 50 states and is USDA certified 100% organic. And there's absolutely no THC content in the oil. It's non-GMO and contains no heavy metals or pesticides. They've been gracious enough to help support us during this time. So if you're wanting to try CBD oil for any of those reasons I mentioned and a lot more on their website, highly encourage you just to give it a shot. Check it out. Go to cocanacare.com. And again, that's CO for Colorado, CANNA care.com.
If you do like the John Muir Trail, even the John Muir Trail, which is regarded as America's most scenic or America's most beautiful trail, but I can show you on the map probably out of like 224 miles on the John Muir Trail, I can show you probably like 75 miles. They're pretty mediocre.
This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we hear stories of adventure from every corner of the planet. We interview all sorts of folks who are using their sport to explore the world around them and give you the inspiration you need to get out there and have some fun. So, this is a revisited episode. It was last year that I interviewed Andrew Skurka. Huge inspiration to me. I remember running across one of his National Geographic stories, the one about the Alaska circumnavigation, essentially. But I wanted to replay this episode for today's revisited episode because I remember him saying something as to why he did his first ever adventure, which was the Appalachian Trail. He did it because of 9/11, and the job market was, crazy. The economy was going nuts, and obviously it was a huge tragedy, and the world was uncertain. But it ultimately ended up changing his entire trajectory in life. And I remember hearing that, and I've been thinking about it lately with everything going on, and just thought, for a lot of us in 10 years and 5 years even, and even in just a couple years, we're going to be having people on this show who decided to do their adventure because of the quarantine and the pandemic, as well as all the other social issues going on. Basically, the state of the world will cause folks to do these adventures they've always been talking about, and then eventually have the stories to tell on shows like this. So I wanted to replay that so you can hear from someone who's done that, who went through that, that kind of transition, that kind of change of mindset, and also hopefully you can learn from them, because I'm a firm believer that anything you're going through, whether you like it or not, is a moment to learn, and then it's an opportunity to change something, to be better. I don't think that's news to anybody, but the really hard part is just putting it into practice. So I love talking to folks, and I love showcasing folks who have taken some sort of change of plans and turned it into, well, for Andrew, what he now does for a living. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you learn something from his story, and I hope you continue supporting and sharing the show. It looks like y'all really enjoyed Monday's episode. It got a ton of downloads. So if you haven't listened to it, check it out. Dana Starkell. It was just an awesome conversation. It didn't go the way I thought it would go, but that's usually always for the better, and it was definitely for the better in this case. It was incredible. So check that out, and also, support some of the sponsors we have now. It's really awesome to be able to have some support during this time. So, all right, here is the episode. Your Alaska trip inspired me to go to Alaska on a bicycle, and from that point on, I just had been a huge fan of yours. I saw it in National Geographic. I reached out to you then, just to say hello. I mean, you get tons of that, but that was right when the trip happened, and it was just really inspiring. And just wanted to say thanks for that, first of all, and of course, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, it's funny. That trip has been long enough ago now where I'm like, I look back at that. I'm like, wow, that was a cool trip. That was like, who was that guy? Because that guy was a lot different than the one you're looking at in the mirror every morning.
Oh man, so stinking relatable. I believe it. It's just something. I remember going through some YouTube videos that you were uploading and just reading all the articles and just thinking like, this is absolutely nuts. And the longer I followed you, the more I realized like, okay, you've built a career out of this. Things have slowly gained, and at times I'm sure quickly gained a lot of traction. But overall, it has been. I mean, you're considered like a backpacking god now.
Yeah, it's been slow and steady. Like I just I don't think I would. It's funny. Like I sometimes wonder if I'm like still relevant to this whole scene. But my my focus has shifted, and I think even though I'm still that guy who walked around Alaska, but like I've evolved. So like now and you can relate to this, but like I'm married, I own a home, I run a small business, I guide trips. I have a cat that I adore. I have like kind of like I started ultra running again, or running competitively again, and sort of shifted out of those like multi-month trips. So like evolutions are good, but when I don't know, like in the backpacking world, I do wonder like the energy and the attention is very much on like the big long distance trails and on like the JMT and stuff. And I'm like, man, I haven't been on the JMT since 2007. So, I mean, Instagram didn't even exist when I was on the
Yeah.
Pacific.
Some of those little saplings are 10, 50, 12 years old now.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, things have changed a lot. So it's, and then, yeah. So,
Interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, I've heard awesome interviews with you just going through the details of those trips. So I'll try to make it something fresh and relevant for you. But a lot of people are going to want to know, like, how did this start for you in the sense of, what were your earliest outdoor experiences that basically the match that began to light this all on fire for you?
yeah, I'm an unlikely person to be where I am now. Not the unlikeliest, but you wouldn't have looked at me when I was 18 or even like 20 and gone like, "Oh, this guy's going to become this when he's 37." So I grew up southeastern Mass, pretty like devoid of open space and mountains or hills for that matter, and but it was always something that appealed to me. So we would go on family vacations like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, but it was never something I could do with any with nothing that I could dedicate a lot of time to, just because I didn't have the access. And so then I went to school. I went to Duke, and at the time I was expecting like Wall Street track or something like that. And I spent the first summer in college. I sort of made this recognition that I was like, like I'm going to spend probably most of my life like during the summer under fluorescent lights, and why not just like have like a blowout summer and go do something like different that you've kind of always wanted to do. So I worked at the summer camp out in Western North Carolina, and it was like the most corrupting experience I've ever had, and partly because I was having so much fun. I was like mountain biking and rock climbing and caving, and then in the morning before the kids would get up, I go for like these awesome trail runs. So that was part of it. And the other part of it was I was hanging out with a bunch of people who lived these very unconventional lives, where they would like, I mean, they were doing van life like before hashtag, right? So they were like, they would work at the summer camp in the summer, and then they would like go down Joshua Tree for the winter and like just go rock climb, and then they would like get an odd job for a couple months and like pay some more bills, and they basically had like no money. They had like really crappy cars, but they were just like totally living it up and loved life. I was like, well, that's really different, because I grew up in this very sort of like New England, very that's what I'm looking for, a very focused family, I think is maybe a fair way to describe it. Dad's a banker, mom's a teacher. And so that was like totally corrupting. And then it kind of went from there. I, hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2002. I graduated from Actually, the next summer I came out to Colorado and worked. I was interned for Go Light, which was like a big thing at the time and like was really changing the scene. And then after graduating, I did my big C2C trip, which was a 11-month, 7,800-mile hike from Quebec to Washington State. And then 2 years after that, I did the Great Western Loop, which was 6,875 miles in 7 months around the American West. And then 2010, I did the Alaska trip.
Yeah. So something that I always tell my wife, especially when things are hard, is that, babe, one day this will all just be a sentence. Yeah. 2019 was really sucked. Or, you know what I mean? You're running through these things like you're near death. There's probably 1,000 near death experiences and all that. And you're just saying, yeah, I did this 11,000-mile hike.
There are a few near deaths, but there are definitely some really uncomfortable, lots of uncomfortable days. So yeah, and
it's just a sentence now.
It's just a sentence. That's a great way to describe it. I know, it's nuts. Yeah,
unreal. Yeah. And I remember I heard that your parents didn't really like this newfound passion in you. Was that true?
No, they were totally opposed to it, like adamantly opposed to it. So, and for, I get it. I got it then. I get it now. They had just spent a lot of money and put me through Duke. And bigger than that is that they didn't want their son to do what they perceived to be just like throwing away opportunity. So, they thought that me, like, being this wanderer was not going to get me anywhere. And and it's odds are that should have been the case. It didn't end up being that way, but so my parents did not. It's funny, they fought it, but they were also like, once I made a decision, they would support it.
So what do they think now?
Oh, my life's changed a lot. So I don't go on 6-month-long trips anymore with
right.
With grizzly bears, around every corner. So they don't have any issues. Not to mention, like, I think my mom at this point should be like, well, like, you're married, so you're your wife's responsibility, and I have 4 grandkids from your sisters, so
she got what she wants.
Exactly,
you're settled down. She's got the grandkids. Now, my mom tells me that's my only purpose now, and so I honestly believe her. Like, I think if I could give her grandkids and she'd never see me again, she'd be fine.
Yeah. I it's definitely funny living out. So we live in Colorado, and my parents are still in Massachusetts, and it's definitely like a different dynamic with being without kids and living, 2/3 of the way across the country versus the relationship that my sisters have with her.
I believe it, because your sister's still close.
Yeah, they're all in Boston. Yeah.
Wow, man. That is so. Are you happy with the way things have gone for you in the last, since your first trip in 2002, the AT?
Yeah. So I had a great time in my 20s. Like, they were, I did exactly what someone in their 20s should do. So it's the one point in your life where you have the decision-making abilities of an adult, but you don't have any of the, dare I say, like, trappings of adulthood. So you're not married, you haven't started a career, you don't have a mortgage, you haven't grown accustomed to nice things. So yeah, my 20s, I was just like a dirtbag hiker, and I was always like frugal. I'm probably being too generous. I was cheap, so I would spend like no money, and that just allowed me to hike 6-9 months a year and never have to like go in debt to do it, and I could just work seasonally. But between hikes. So yeah, I had no regrets about my 20s. They were awesome. My 30s, I think I'm a little bit more conflicted about. So I'm 37 now, and I did my last big trip in 2010. And since that trip, I haven't done another trip that's longer than 2 weeks. At least like one trip. Instead, like, I still get out for, like, last year, I think I slept on the ground like 65 nights. So that's still pretty good.
Yeah.
Since 2014, 2015, 14, 15, 16, and 2018, I ran more than 3,000 miles. And in 2017, I ran more than 4,000 miles. So, like, I'm still really active. But it's different now. Like I spend a lot more time in front of a computer. Have a lot more responsibilities. I don't feel like I could just like, I don't know, hey, April is right around the corner. I'm gonna drop all my stuff and go for a 6 month long trip. I just can't do that right now.
Do you want to?
I don't know about a 6 month long trip, but I would love, like, if I could just spend the summer like backpacking in awesome places and just like scouting out a bunch of new high routes. I totally would do it. Like, no doubt about it. Yeah.
But I've heard you say, you hear a lot from people who basically say, "Man, I wish I would have done what you did at that age, but now I'm in my 50s or getting close to retirement, and I'm going to do it at the end." Are you happy that you did it this way?
Oh yeah, for sure. I would not have wanted to wait until I retired to do some of these things. Because you're not going to be. I'm sorry. It's not that you're not going to be able to. It's much more difficult.
It's hard to predict what's going to happen, for sure.
It's harder to predict. You're not sure if your body's going to be as cooperative. You might, and I think almost too, like, you might not want to give up some of the nice things that you've acquired in your adulthood. Like, I really like the fact that I own a nice home. Like, my wife and I were sitting on the couch the other day, and we're like, wow, our home has gotten really comfortable. Like, we have this nice fireplace, like this really plush sofa, and like, and it's just comfortable to be there. And I don't like, that's a little harder, and of course our cat is like cuddled up with us, and like we got lots of blankets going because, as you know, it's been like a pretty cold winter here in Colorado on the Front Range. So yeah, you might not be willing to give those things up as easily as you get older. So I would say, like, right now, I guess I feel like I'm kind of putting in I'm doing good work, and I feel like I'm putting in a really good foundation for the future. So like, I still feel like I'm still kind of building, and maybe in a couple of years I'll have even more balance than I have now. So,
your last trip in 2010, that was the big Alaska trip.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. Well, I'll do a little thing in the intro just explaining it more, but people just look it up. Like, it's unreal. I won't have you rehash all the details unless you want to, but like, it was crazy. You became National Geographic Adventurer of the Year in a large part because of that trip.
No, you're right. It was a nutty trip. Like, it was something, I don't know, it was like, now I look and go like, wow, you kind of had to be in like a special place to even be able to dream up something like that.
To execute it. Yeah. Yeah. Unreal.
Still young and dumb enough probably would be one requirement. And then you couldn't feel beholden to anything, because the risk would be so high. So, like, there, no, like, I don't know how you could justify to a spouse going on that trip.
Yeah, I feel like I've done, especially in the first few years of marriage, some stupid things, like looking back, like, man, why did I do that? Like, that's not mature with trips.
Yeah,
and then, like,
mature. Yeah.
Before that, just the things that you would do, just unbelievable. But yeah, this is definitely something where great way to put it. Not beholden to anything in life, with just the danger, the level of uncertainty with almost every turn. You're looking at a map and you just have no idea what's going to be around the next corner with animals or circumstances or weather. Gosh, it's Alaska. I mean,
yep,
it's untamed in every way. But that did, in a way, launch you into what you're doing now. What after that trip, what did you start to do to build that career? What were some of the streams of income that just started popping up?
Well, so I'll qualify your statement a little bit. I think that the Alaska trips put me over the edge. So I'd done some, like, my other trips prior to that were still really outstanding. I mean, backpacker person of the year for that C2C trip, outside adventure of the year for the Great Western Loop. So, like, but it's kind of like the third one where it was like, wow, this is like, cumulatively really impressive record at this point.
Sorry about that.
So, well, no, I think that's because and it wasn't ever the plan for me to like go like, oh, if I just spend all of my 20s hiking as much as I can, you'll be able to make a legitimate occupation out of this in your 30s.
Right.
That was never the plan. But what happened, and what you kind of alluded to, is that like as things went along, I started getting opportunities to transition it from being, I think, what I would describe as like a sustainable lifestyle. So, where income and expenses are about equal, or maybe hopefully a little bit of a surplus. But you're really like, you're still hustling a lot. Like there's not a whole lot of stability, but you're having fun. You're doing exactly what you want to do almost every day. And so then I transitioned that into like a legitimate occupation, where now like I own a home. And I was like, when I asked a woman to marry me, she said yes, instead of going like, no, you can't even buy me a ring or it's like this. And so originally, like I was doing a lot of speaking. So I think like in the first 2 years after the Alaska trip, I did like 110 events, which is just like nuts. And I would never turn down an opportunity. Like a Boy Scout troop in Missouri would call me like, hey, like, would you be willing to come and speak for our Boy Scout troop? And I'd be like, well, like, what do you think you could offer? They'd be like, well, we think we could probably offer you maybe like $500. And be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. So then I would, like fly to Missouri, and at the same time, like I would figure out, like I would find another venue, maybe like up in Omaha, and that was only like a day's drive away, and I would kind of stitch together these speaking tours. So that was kind of that was at the beginning, and then I came out with the Gear Guide in 2012. And I also started guiding trips in 2011, but it was a pretty small scale, where I just guided, like 2011, I guided 2 1-week-long trips and 1 2-week trip. So it's 3 trips total. And then I just sort of, the guiding and the content have grown much more. I actually do very little speaking nowadays. So nowadays I guide, I manage, this year I'm managing 20 trips with capacity for 176 clients. I'm in 4 locations. And it's a total of like 96 days worth of trips. And of those, I'll be guiding about a third. And then the rest, I work with other guides for them to run them. So that's kind of the guiding. And then on the content stuff, like, the website, I've try to contribute to my website as much as possible. So there's a bunch of like content up there in addition to the Gear Guide, which got revised in 2016. So this is all sort of like, like when someone says like, oh, well, what do you do? I say, well, I'm self-employed. And inevitably that's like, well, what do you do when you're self-employed? I'm like, well, I say that I have my hands in a lot of different things, and I guide trips, and I develop a lot of content, and I used to do some consulting too, for like Sierra Designs, and then like some virtual coaching, and I do some speaking. So just, or like, I kind of have my eggs in multiple baskets, and I'm able to change my business depending on kind of what my interests are at any given time, and kind of what the market is telling me.
Yeah, because it definitely seems, I feel like speaking did have its heyday 10 years back or something. I don't know. That might not be true, but I feel like with my research and my interests, speaking was a lot more popular a decade ago. Have you found that?
Well, I don't. Your next guest, Heather, would probably be a better one to tell you. Like she's a lot more active on that circuit right now. I just found that. Two things. First is that if I just got tired of telling like the same story, so that was part of it, and the story was also kind of getting old. And I'll still like bust out my Alaska Yukon presentation when I'm asked, and it's like, for example, in May, I'm going down to University of New Mexico. One of my clients is the chair of a department down there, and he asked me to speak to his group. So I'll go down there and I'll bust out my Alaska Yukon presentation, but it'll be fun. Like I haven't given it like in a year, and it'll be fine. But I got tired of telling that story. And then the bigger thing is that, now when Amanda and I started getting serious and eventually we got married, I started looking at all of my days of business travel as just days away. And then it was like, okay, so if I'm going to spend days away, what's the best way to spend those days? And it's not by doing presentations in Kansas City for Boy Scouts for $500. Like that's really fun, and I hope that those boys got something out of my presentation. But that's a lot of like trains, planes, and automobiles for me, and it's a pretty shallow relationship as far as like, I walk in, I'm there for 2 hours, and then I leave. And I would much rather guide trips, and it's more fruitful financially. But the bigger thing is that like I'm getting to spend like this summer I'm spending 2.5 weeks up in Alaska, 2.5 weeks in Yosemite, and I'll oversee the trips for 2.5 weeks in Rocky Mountain National Park. Like that is awesome. Like, why do you want to spend your day in Denver International Airport and on the Southwest plane, or do you want to be out and be active? So it's a pretty easy one.
I mean, it makes a ton of sense, especially for you, someone who's had the experiences themselves. It's hard to go straight from that to something that, in a way, even though you're talking about it, it has none of the same feeling, none of the same physical engagement.
Zero.
Yeah.
No, it's like so. I've kind of I don't know how to describe it. I'm kind of in the outdoor industry. Like I've been in it in the past, and like I go to OR usually twice a year. And what you're like, me going out and doing a bunch of speaking is very similar to like how like someone works for like a gear company, where they're like they have their hands on gear every day, and the people that are around are also really interested in the outdoors. But like, you being in an office up in Gun Barrel at the Kelty office is not nearly as good as you being in the field using Kelty gear.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes tons of sense. I mean, you see, former professional athletes have to pick up something else physical rather than speak about their career or something. It is a balance, because you're going to want to do some of that. You're going to want to share it. It's these times of experiences, no matter how much of a hermit you are out there during the trip, come on, they're meant to be shared. Like, people got to know what this is like in your experience. So that's what we're doing right now. You're not hiking right now. Well, at least I don't think you are, but there's a bunch of people going to appreciate this interview. So it's a balance. Going from all these crazy experiences into what you're doing now and being, 10 years in or so or more into trying to make or successfully making a living off this. Has it ever gotten to the point where you're like, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to do something else? And if that was the case, and if you have thought that, what would you do if you weren't doing this?
Oh, all right. Well, so it's kind of two questions. So the first, it's been a long time since I was like, should I be doing something else with my life? Because I think at this point, probably what I could earn from a conventional job is probably on par with I earn a reasonable income right now. Awesome. So why would I switch? Whereas like when I get back from my Alaska trip, I actually kind of came back with the attitude of like, look, like, see what opportunities present themselves. And but if this isn't like, if you still feel like you're really like hustling, and if you don't feel like you have enough financial stability, then maybe it's time to just make the outdoors something like a passion, but like go do something like normal. Because it was tough. Like, when I left for that Alaska trip, and for that matter, when I came back, I like all of my possessions could fit in my Pontiac Vibe. Wow. That statement you get from the Social Security Administration every year, and they're like, "This is how much you've earned, over the past, since you've been 13 years old." And I mean, there are some years where I look and I'm like, how did I ever survive that year? Like, I earned like nothing, and I would come back. Like when I got back from my Alaska trip, I did not have a single guaranteed paycheck like into eternity. Like there was not one. So like I had to get home and like get on the phone and start making things happen if I wanted to like pay my rent. So that could kind of, I think that lifestyle, at least for me, like that had an expiration date. I just was like tired of living like that. As much fun as I was having, it still was sort of like exhausting and like emotionally taxing to kind of like always, I was just like getting too old for it. So like I didn't own a pair of sheets until I was 31 years old. I can't believe I'm admitting this. My wife is going to be like appalled. But yeah, like she was the reason I bought sheets, is because she's like, these sheets that you're like that happen to be like that you found in the linen closet in the house that you're renting a room in, like they're gross and you need new sheets. So yeah, and like so that's kind of the way my life was. So as far as the other question, like what I would be doing if I wasn't doing this, so I actually like inherently enjoy running a business. So I actually think I would probably find some other way to like sell or offer widgets as a product or service. Like I'm pretty good at running a business as far as attention and detail and just sort of like understanding sort of markets. And so I enjoy being an entrepreneur. I won't, there are a lot of like little details that sometimes drive me crazy, but that's part of how you can succeed in making a business. Because if you have the sort of ability to pay attention to those details, my accountant, actually my tax accountant, he usually always like flatters me at how good my QuickBooks are, and he's like, well, if you ever, if this doesn't work out, you're, like, let me know.
That's got to feel good.
Yeah, it feels good. Yeah.
So you are definitely a details person.
Oh, a super details person. Yeah, I mean, like,
because you have to be doing some of those trips.
Have to be, yeah. Like for the trips, like they're just so logistics heavy. Like both my personal trips were. Like, can you imagine, like, so on a 6-month long trip, if you miscalculate by half a day how much food you need to have sent to a certain location, you're going to be really upset with yourself. So like you can't make mistakes like that. And then similarly nowadays with like my guided trips, like if I show up to the trailhead and I like forgot to print out the maps, or if I forget like even like a bag of potatoes, that is not good for somebody. So you've got to be super detail oriented to do what I do.
That comes natural for you.
First time I saw a spreadsheet, but probably when I saw it, I was like, oh, I get this. This makes sense to me.
Well, that's great, man, because I don't think you could do what you do any other way. So you keep pretty good track of what you're doing. What would you say to somebody who's young and maybe wanting to start this path or try to forge a career out of the outdoors? What's some of your early on advice?
I discourage trying to like forge a career. I think there are like a couple ways. I think if you want to have like great outdoor experiences, then you should go do that. And like just kind of like figure out a way to make it happen. But don't like, I think it's really unlikely that you're a recent, or you're coming up on college graduation and you're like, oh, like if I'm going to plan this big C2C trip and it's going to make me famous, I'm going to make a living off of it. I think that is hard. I think that's probably unlikely. So I would say like just go do your C2C trip and like have a great time with it, and maybe afterwards keep an eye out for opportunities, but like just be more focused about the experience you're trying to have and not so much on what might come out of it later, because it's also pretty hard to balance those things. It's tough because like you're doing this big trip and like you have an interest in sharing it and maybe building up a little bit of a platform for yourself. But on the other hand, like that effort takes away from your experience. It just is it can be a distraction. So like if you're like coming into town and you feel like you're like, oh man, I need to spend like a whole day blogging. Like, well, did you go out like to go like on this trip to go blog, or did you go out to go on this trip?
That's good, man. I think there's a lot of that out there. I think that inauthenticity, that's a word, comes through. You know what I mean? Like it's I think people definitely pick up on the true motives of what you're doing. And it does seem that the greatest reward comes to those who really aren't looking for it, and are looking beyond that, looking at the actual experience itself.
Yeah, you just, and the other thing too, these experiences are really hard.
Yeah,
like you're gonna talk to Heather. I mean, Heather just I don't know what she does. She hiked like 30 or 35 miles a day for like 10 straight months. Like that's just hard. Like you can't like it's just, you're not gonna make it through like months of that if your justification for it is like, well, I'm going to be as famous as Heather Anderson. It's just not going to happen. So
There's easier ways to be famous, that's for sure.
Much easier ways. Yeah.
And a lot less lonely. And yeah, just gosh, that's crazy. So one thing I did want to ask is, you're not only did your Alaska trip inspire me to fly to Alaska, your Great Western Loop trip, man. I absolutely love that. I didn't have the time to hike it, and I was kind of into bike packing. So I followed that route as close as possible on a bicycle. And holy cow, what an experience. And I can't even imagine how much cooler it was to be on those trails. And is it cool to see that this is going to be like a legit route now?
I mean, I think one guy did it. This past year, so that makes two. I doubt that. I mean, this is not a route that is going to be done by a lot of people.
You don't think it'll become the new through hiking like crown?
No, because what happens is that, like, so you have you need to get up through the High Sierra really early in the season, and you need to get out of Colorado before like it gets nasty. So you struggle to push up through the High Sierra like anytime before June is really hard. Like, I mean, if you're in the High Sierra in May in a normal year, like you should bring your skis.
For sure.
And then in Colorado, you have like you need to get out of the state by October 1st, preferably. Like October 15th is probably like the latest you can reasonably do. You could like start kind of dropping low if you start running into late October. But in between those 2 points, there's so much mileage because you need to go from the High Sierra, you need to go all the way up to Canada, all the way over to the Rockies, and then down the Continental Divide to Colorado. So it's a ton of miles, and you just need to be hauling tail. I mean, it needs to be like 35 miles a day for like 4 months, and there just aren't that many people athletically who can handle that. So
no. There's not. I mean, that makes good sense.
Yes, that's why I think it's just not going to be like a common thing. What I think I'm probably more excited, and on the Great Western Loop. So it's cool that you did it on a bike. I think you probably still got a really like awesome experience of it. I think the coolest thing for me is that you're seeing like the whole mountain west and like kind of the desert southwest, and you start looking at it like much more holistically as like a landscape and a region, and you start to understand. Kind of the you see how sensitive it is and how sort of delicate the whole system is. So it's pretty fascinating for me, like as someone because like I love backpacking and I love the mechanics of backpacking, but I think actually what backpacking has done is given me this opportunity to quench my intellectual curiosities. So like just even at the library on Sunday, I picked up a book about the Colorado River because like I still like I'm fascinated 12 years later with this topic of the American West and water in the West. So, yeah. So I think, I think the routes that I'm more excited about people starting to replicate are these high routes that I've started putting together. So like the Wind River High Route, the Fifner Traverse, the soon to be released Yosemite High Route, the Kings Canyon High Basin Route. Like these are like, for me, these have been super gratifying to put together, and then they're fairly accessible. Like it's a pretty high skill level that people need to have to get onto them because it's a lot of off-trail travel and like extreme vertical change. But they don't require like I don't know how long it took you to bike the Great Western Loop, but they don't require you to take 7 months off. They can it's something you can do in like a long weekend or a week, maybe 2 weeks for like the longest through hikes out there. So that's sort of the last couple of years. It's been the projects that have interested me most.
It sounds like they're short enough to still be doable, no matter how many responsibilities you start to pile on, for anyone. But they're also beautiful enough that you're kind of bypassing a lot of the mundane parts of some of these through hikes. It's always beautiful. But there are mundane sections, and this seems to be kind of the highlights. Yeah, that's the whole idea. It's you start and you finish, and everything in between is awesome. And there's no like, oh yeah, it's like imagine if you do like the John Muir Trail, even the John Muir Trail, which is regarded as America's most scenic trail, I think they say, or America's most beautiful trail. But I can
show you on the map probably out of like 224 miles on the John Muir Trail. I can show you probably like 75 miles. They're pretty mediocre, like not much in the way of views.
You're going to make a
like
lot of people mad saying that.
that's fine. I'm just telling you the truth. And like, and I'm just telling you the truth because I've been in the High Sierra a lot, and the John Muir Trail is a very scenic trail. But is it like phenomenal for 224 miles? No, it's got some sections on it where you're like, okay, like I wouldn't mind getting through this in order to get back to something better. So I'm thinking like of along like Red's Meadow and the section along like Bear Creek and like Silver Pass, like after Silver Pass and some of those like lower elevation areas, or even for that matter, from Happy Isles in Yosemite Valley all the way up to Tuolumne. And you know what? Lyell Canyon, it's like I've been in Yosemite a lot. Like Lyell Canyon, it's cool, but like it's not great. It's like it's kind of tedious.
Whoa. I love Happy Isles and Tuolumne. I don't know. It's a chance. It's honestly more sentimental than anything. So I got it. If I think about that, then I might agree.
It's a lot of miles. It's a lot of miles in like in forest, and it can be really dusty. And you pass by Half Dome, like that'd be like an awesome side trip, and it's fun to go over Cathedral Pass. But like I know there's trust me, there's like much better stuff in Yosemite than what the John Muir Trail shows you. So that's the idea with the high routes, is like to get you into those other areas where it's like a super concentrated experience, and it tries to be awesome like every single mile. And when you run out of awesome terrain, the route stops. It's over.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That we have a lot of people with Camp Crate that want to go to Yosemite, and we have 3 unofficial itineraries that we built last year that'll be official this year that are kind of based over in Mammoth. And we're like telling people, like, trust us, it's epic over here because it's high elevation. It's going to be a lot less busy. It's just totally underrated. The eastern side of the Sierras and the High Sierra in general. It's right. Gosh, it's awesome.
Yeah. Are you taking groups up in like Thousand Island Lake area?
It's the self-guided tours.
Okay.
So we adequately equip them, but then we ship the gear into Mammoth and they pick it up there. So we have them, especially if they're coming from LA, we'll try to talk them out of Yosemite into Mammoth Lake. It's a cooler drive. You go up 395. It's just
right. Yeah,
it's just a fun. There's cool side trip. But to wrap up, how can people keep in touch with you, and how can they sign up for one of your trips if they want to?
Yeah. So to keep. I don't know. I don't want to say follow me, but like if you'd like more information, like to see some of the content that I'm putting out there, it's all up on my website, which is my full name, andrewskurka.com. And then as far as the trips goes, the trips this year they're mostly full. I've got a few spots like in West Virginia, and I think I still have a few spots in Colorado. But like all the Alaska trips and all the California trips are full at this point. Usually I open registration in January, and there's like an open application window of like 2 weeks, and most of the trips at the end of that period will be full. So I always tell people to kind of sign up early. Yeah, it's nice that to have that certainty at the beginning of the year. Like I can transition from out of marketing and just go right into planning. So like today I actually started the planning curriculum for the trips, and I can there'll still be a few registrations here and there between now and the trip starts, but probably at this point like 95% of the spots are full. So I just go right into talking about what gear everyone's going to need, and here and like let's print out our maps, and here's the food and all the rest.
That's awesome. Well, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us and telling us a little bit about probably things people don't typically hear from your stories. But I'll totally link everything that they need to know about you and how they can find out more. So yeah, thanks for being on the show.
You bet. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no worries. All right, man. We'll have a good one.
Sounds good. Bye-bye.
All right. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.